Hello you beautiful misfits, Matt here with finally the last of my E3 2017 videos. This one covering the Devolver Digital Conference, although it wasn't really a conference as such, but rather an admittedly well produced piss take of the entire media circus that is E3. Which is the kind of thing I should enjoy, right? After all, I've only spent the past several months doing pretty much just that, so this parody conference should be right up my alley. Well, no, frankly. As satires of E3 go, this one didn't exactly hit the mark for me, and that's putting it kindly. And that's a real shame, since it was produced by Imagos Films. If you're a fan of horror games, you might remember them for the brilliant Transmission series of short films made to promote Soma back in 2015. That, along with the seeming universal praise for it on Twitter and other social media, gave me reasonable hopes for the Devolver Digital Big Fancy Press Conference 2017, to give it its official title. Unfortunately, the pre-show segment, featuring candid testimonials of streamers and YouTubers roasting Devolver, disabused me of that notion rather quickly.
The Devolver conference up next. Oh wait, isn't Devolver just fucking indie games?
Then one Nina Struthers, Chief Synergy Officer, played superbly by Seattle-based actress Maria Zook, comes on stage before a perpetually clapping crowd. She asks them to stop clapping because they're professional journalists, but they don't, so she fires off a gun. They still clap because that's what E3 audiences do. Even if the world was ending, they'd keep whooping and clapping, right? Even though the most obnoxious hype people in your average E3 conference crowd are usually employees of the company in question and would probably lose their jobs if they didn't whoop it up. Not to mention that around 99% of actual games journos will happily talk your arse off about how much they detest that sort of thing, especially after a drink or two. Anyhow, after a person in a deliberately bad mocap suit removes her gun from the stage, Nina gives everyone a stern patrician welcome.
I'd like to thank you for joining me here at the Dave Lang Memorial Convention Center.
Okay, that line did make me chuckle a bit, but then I also happen to be familiar with who Dave Lang is. Not something that could be said for absolutely everybody watching this. FYI, he's a former Midway Games alumnus like Ed Mortal Kombat Boone, as well as the founder of Iron Galaxy Studios, a semi-regular guest on Giant Bomb's yearly E3 presentations, sole resident of the Lang Zone, and one of the programmers on Space Jam for the Sega Saturn, amongst other things. Nina then talked about delivering tomorrow's unethical business practices today, used the word very a lot, ostensibly for comedic effect, and delivered an incisive, scathing, but above all, subtle summary of E3 conferences and E3 in general.
All of which is designed to subtly convince you to give us your hard-earned money.
Before we then cut to a live reaction camera of Jessica Chobot falling out of her chair from quote-unquote boredom. Because lol, random, and because someone somewhere out there clearly decided we hadn't seen enough of her in Mass Effect 3. Suddenly, and despite Devolver Digital having repeatedly asserted they had zero games to show off at this nonference, they actually showed a trailer for one. A really smashing trailer at that for Runa, an isometric sci-fi action adventure that is seemingly a cloned cyberpunk love hybrid of Hotline Miami, Smash TV and Crusader No Remorse, and which is out now. Up next was another Seattle-based actor, Asa Fager, as Milo Lowry of Devolver's Research and Development and More Research division, to literally, with the help of Carlina Gore playing his assistant Margaret, unveil Devolver Digital ScreenPay, a revolutionary and completely fictional new payment system whereby you literally throw money at the screen. Look at us! We're referencing a meme! Aren't we clever? For which Milo plucked an ordinary game-playing person from the audience dressed to the nines entirely in Devolver-branded merchandise to demonstrate. Long story short, it doesn't end well for our unfortunate volunteer. I genuinely like this specific bit since I have a real soft spot for practical special effects. I'm one of those people who watch something like this scene from The Thing, for example, and spend ages afterwards quietly wondering how they did it. That, and I'm a bit of a sucker for a spot of good old Grand Guignol. After another trailer, this time for Serious Sam Bogus Detour, Nina returns to yell,
"Buy that motherfucking game!"
before presenting a piss take of pre-order culture and early access called Devolver Digital Earliest Access, complete with random made-up business gibberish, which elicited something of a tiny wry smile from yours truly. Then, as if by magic, a random guest appearance from No More Heroes director Suda51, for absolutely no reason whatsoever except, perhaps, just to feature Suda51, which is possibly the single solitary creative idea behind this segment. Like someone at Imagos Films had a marker board with random Suda51 guest appearance ? Written on it, and nothing else. Nina then returned with Margaret the blood-drenched assistant from earlier, who wheels out another CRT monitor. The same random audience member from before is brought back on stage, Sun's Arm, to demonstrate comment-created content, in which games are changed in an instant by literally shitposting on the internet. Whereupon things very quickly became a bit David Lynch, and not in a Twin Peaks Season 3 Episode 8 kind of way. More in a film student trying to imitate David Lynch while also chucking in some Dario Argento just because kind of way. Poor old blameless Marge dies, the maimed audience member goes insane, and Nina's head violently explodes, Scanners style. The man in the cheap mocap suit from earlier then drags her corpse away, like the little green bloke from Barbarian on the Commodore Amiga. And then the entire affair concludes on a frankly not funny lol random note with a talking burrito. So, to summarise. Well, there were some things I liked about it, so let's get them out of the way first, shall we? Firstly, I deliberately made a point of mentioning the actors' names throughout this summary/review because I genuinely enjoyed their performances. Regardless of what I thought of the material they had to work with, they took it and did the best they could with it. Maria Zook's performance as Nina Struthers is the one that will, quite rightly, leave the strongest impression on most people, but I'd also like to give praise where it's due to Asa Fager as Milo Lowry. He absolutely nailed the smarmy corporate executive shtick so succinctly that you could have snuck him onto the stage during the EA conference and nobody would realise he wasn't supposed to be there. With this performance, he could deliberately fail a Voight-Kampff test so spectacularly his own mother would think he was a replicant, and a Blade Runner would get fired for retiring a human. Another thing I liked about the conference was the production quality. It was filmed simply and cleanly and well framed and had solid editing, with the exception of a noticeable, albeit slight, jump cut during one of the Nina Struthers segments. The practical effects also deserve praise, particularly the spurting arcs of stage blood. While quite obviously working to a strict budget, you can tell a good amount of work went into creating them, and they turned out very well. So it's all the more a pity that all this talent is sadly let down by a rather weak script. As satires go, the Devolver Digital Big Fancy Press Conference 2017 was about as subtle as a naked, visibly aroused hobo smashing your teeth in with a sock full of coins while screaming, "I am mocking the consumerism of this yearly corporate lollapalooza. Also, I am very clever. Look at how clever I am." Now, there's nothing wrong with being unsubtle. Sometimes the only way to really hit home whatever satirical point you're making is to do it full force. But if you do that, you need to fully commit to it. The Devolver Digital Big Fancy Press Conference, meanwhile, seemed in two minds about whether it wanted to go completely over the top or to try and play it straight, swinging between both yet failing to really connect with either. It would have been more impactful had it been played entirely straight or entirely nonsensical and surreal. The use of streamer/YouTube reaction clips were another detriment, since nobody featured in these segments was actually fucking funny. Even the Funhouse guys, who are usually amusing, came across more as annoying and obnoxious. Now, you could argue that's the point Imagers were trying to make, although my counterpoint would be that's way too subtle for a parody that was anything but. Perhaps the biggest failing of this non-conference was it seemed to assume everyone that watches E3 does so without a single shred of irony, that we're all sat in front of our screens in eager reverence, clad in our branded Sony, Xbox or Nintendo t-shirts, proudly waving little corporate labelled flags and regarding the whole shebang with an utmost seriousness and respect it neither conveys nor deserves. Which is bollocks, of course. The overwhelming majority who tune in to watch E3 know full well how inherently ridiculous it is. We don't all get together on live streams, Twitter, forums and elsewhere to sit in collective religious awe. We do it to watch a ludicrous commercial train wreck unfold before our eyes, then sift through the wreckage for the scattered giblets of information we actually give a damn about. In conclusion, the Devolver Digital Big Fancy Press Conference 2017 was an admirable attempt to satirise the already ridiculous that ultimately falls flat. Very well produced, with good acting and effects, yet somewhat muddled, scattershot and patronising. The final result is 15 minutes of the audience being talked down to, about something the overwhelming majority of them already know, by a writer who thinks they're very, very clever. I didn't go into it expecting the quality of something like, say, Yes Minister, but I would have liked to have gotten more out of it than a single chuckle. At a Dave Lang reference of all things. And so, with that final conference summarised for your convenience and, hopefully, amusement, hello you beautiful misfits, my name is Matt and this is Pixel Burn, where I take a snarky look at some of the more important, interesting or irritating things to have happened in the week's gaming news. Oh boy.